Do you love to world build, especially cities and communities and civilizations? And you want to do it with a group of friends where everyone has input on the matter and everyone can change elements and can bring something new to this community? Well, you should try The Quiet Year, which is the game that we are talking about today on the RPG Goblin. The Quiet Year is not actually a TTRPG, but it is a game that is quite commonly used to actually inspire settings for TTRPGs when you're done playing. You basically go through an entire year and you and your friends take turns and build this community together. It is a perfect game for one-shots or if you're just looking for something quick to play with a couple of friends for a night. I brought on Jay to talk about The Quiet Year with me, and while talking about how to actually play the game, they actually share stories from their own personal game of The Quiet Year that they have played. So, let's get into it. So, today I brought on Jay again to talk about The Quiet Year, which is a very interesting RPG that is about world building, actually. I don't know if I would say it's as much an RPG as it is more so like a game, but it's very close. I'd say it would fall under that umbrella. And yeah, that is what we're going to be talking about today on the RPG Goblin. And before we get started, I would like you, Jay, if you would please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jay. I run Magpie Dice Co., where I make dice. If you've listened to the Wonder Home episode, that is me. I'm here again with another kind of cozy game. I have a type.
Very cozy. Yeah. So I'm very excited. I've heard a little bit about The Quiet Year, just like passing by. And I didn't quite look into it fully until recently when we discussed doing this episode. And I would love if you would explain how would you explain Quiet Year to someone who knew nothing about the game at all?
Yeah, so like you said, it's akin to an RPG, but not quite exactly. You basically get a group of friends and you draw a map together and make up a story about this civilization of people who are rebuilding. And you basically tell the story of that through drawing a map, which can either be serious, ridiculous, or a mix of both.
However it forms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting game from because it's very collaborative. It is a whole group of people creating this map and creating the story and creating the situations versus just you. So it's very collaborative. And what I find the most interesting, we'll get more into how the game works in a moment, but during the game itself, there are basically, like it says, it's a quiet year. So it's a whole year. And in the game, there are cards. And the cards represent like the different seasons. So you've got like spring, summer, fall, winter. And as you're playing through the game, you're drawing these cards and essentially answering the questions or drawing the prompts on your map and so forth, and building your community and seeing what interesting answers and what interesting situations can arise from these cards that you pull, which I think is very, very fun in the way that they use the card mechanics. Along with as well, don't worry, you don't need any special cards for this game either, as you can just use a normal deck of playing cards, and they've got something in the back of the book that you can essentially translate what they're for. With kind of that little introduction, very collaborative, would you like to talk about some of the mechanics of the game and how each essentially season and each week is played through?
Yeah, so I think we shortened our game just a little bit because we didn't have a ton of time. So with the seasons, it's each a different suit of cards if you're playing with playing cards. I believe the official cards have the symbols on there too.
I believe so, yeah.
But for spring, you can go through all of the cards in a suit. I think we shortened it to like 8 or so before we switched seasons, just to speed up the game a little bit. But I think you start with spring, and you have the cards shuffled in each suit, but have the suits separately. So spring is hearts, and you will draw a card every week. So you start the game. I believe in the very beginning you pick out a few things before you start drawing cards. Every player will pick out one feature of the map, like mountains or lakes, and then you pick a few things, a few resources. One of them you have an abundance, and then the other ones are scarcities. So for our game, we chose to have water in abundance as our resource. Our scarcities included crops, cows, and knowledge.
The 3 moods. Yeah. And this is through just the initial setup part. You're deciding on essentially like the terrain. Each person makes up a bit on the map, and each person says a resource, and then you decide which are scarcity and which is in abundance. And this is just during the setup. So this is before you're actually playing the game and all of that.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that before we get into drawing cards.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, so we did that, and then we started with spring, and you draw a card, and each one has like a question on it. So I'm just going to pick the 2 of hearts as an example. There's a large body of water on the map. Where is it? What does it look like? Or there is a giant man-made structure on the map. Where is it? Why is it abandoned? So it gives you some options on each one. It gives you 2 different things that you can choose from to do.
I was just about to say, and as you're playing this game, it actually is like turn-based, and even though it is collaborative, each turn is played with just one person. So starting out, it's just one person who draws the card and then makes the changes on the maps, answers the question, all of that. And then other people are supposed to kind of be spectators during each person's turn. And then it goes around the table and everyone gets to contribute to the game and gets to add to the map, but only one person does it at a time, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. It's great in that way where I think it gives everybody a little bit of a spotlight, but also showcases the way that in life you don't really have control over everything.
Exactly, especially in a civilization where there's a lot of people. Not everything's going to be made under the same choices and decisions. It's not going to be the same people making those choices and decisions because it's a bunch of people. And so I like how that kind of translates into playing the game itself with everyone making different decisions on their turn.
Yeah. It's great how it lets you kind of pilot a whole civilization instead of how in typical RPGs you're in charge of one character, but in this case you hold the fate of a whole group of people in your hands.
Not intimidating at all.
Yeah. So once you pull your card and you answer the question, I think we actually drew that at one point because there's a giant combine on the map, like a farming combine, which was a man-made structure that we decided was haunted at a later date and sunk in a lake as time went on. But you could just come up with stuff like that. Like I was just like, yeah, the man-made structure is a combine, and it's just been there for a long time.
It's just there. Yeah, and I like that a lot because there's not really a lot of limits on exactly how to play the game as well. There's not limits on what you can or cannot do within your civilization. You can decide that the wind combine is haunted, and that is now just in your game. That is just a reality of what your game what is in it now.
Yeah.
Same thing as if it decided not to be haunted, that would be then the reality that it would be in there. So there's a lot of wiggle room for how to kind of flavor your world and what is actually like in your world and what's true to your world.
Yeah. And then once you answer the question, you can choose to either discover something new, hold a discussion, or start a project as the second part of your turn. Discovering something new is somewhat similar to answering the question. You can kind of just decide that there's something there. At one point, one of these actions was, there's a hospital that's been abandoned that we discovered. Because I think we had a scarcity of like medical supplies. So we found this abandoned hospital that we then later started a project to explore and try and find like remnants of medical supplies.
Very cool.
And then there's hold a discussion, which I believe the Quiet Year can be played solo, but it's not quite as fun because you are in control of everything, and part of the game is not being in control of everything. You also, I mean, you can hold a discussion with yourself. I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but it's not quite the same experience.
I agree. I think you could definitely adjust some of the rules to play solo, but I think it definitely is its best form playing with a group of people.
Yeah. So the whole discussion was a lot of fun because during it, each person embodies some random member of this society, whether it be like a 4-year-old child or an 80-year-old woman who's very frustrated at the situation. And each person says like 1 to 2 sentences about how that person feels about what is going on. And you, in the discussion, decide what the decision is based on the discussion around whatever situation is occurring. And you move on.
Yeah, nothing's resolved. It's just everyone can speak their mind about whatever is brought up.
Yeah. And then in the next turn, somebody can address that or not. You know, kind of how in real life we will have unproductive meetings for like 3 hours and then nothing happens afterwards.
You mean playing a session of a TTRPG?
Yeah, woo, happens. Shopping episode.
But yeah, that's so basically you could hold a discussion, just for example, of using for the abandoned hospital. You could, at the end of your turn, if that is already there, you might hold a discussion saying, hey, I think that we should go explore the abandoned hospital. Like, that's how the person who opens says it. Yeah. Like, I think we should explore it. And you can either do a statement or a question when you open the discussion. And then it goes around the table, each person, and then they get to put in their input on what their like part of the community thinks or what they think and all of that. And then it ends. So let's say another person's like, I think it might be dangerous. We shouldn't explore the hospital. Someone else might be, maybe we should start a project, or maybe we should try and survey it and look at and do like a recon on it before going in, just to make sure it's okay, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then just the discussion ends, and then next turn, whoever it is decides what they are going to do, if anything, regarding what just happened with the discussion.
Yeah. I think the most interesting part about our discussions is, like I mentioned earlier, we had a scarcity of knowledge. We really played into that during the discussions. So a lot of times they didn't go anywhere because the people were not that smart.
But that's a fun way to use the resources in an interesting way.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be physical resources like wood and water and things like that. It can be knowledge. It can be It could even be music. Like, there's different ways that you could interpret these sorts of resources into your world. Why would music be important that it's considered a resource, and why don't you have a lot of it? Could be an interesting thing to explore in your game and in the world that you are creating.
We love including abstract social forces.
Exactly. Yes.
So it was really interesting to have that as a resource that was scarce, because the rest of our resources were relatively physical. And we were able to address those in a more physical way. But when your scarcity is knowledge, you don't always get a lot of things done.
And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But along with so discovering something new and holding a discussion, there is one more, correct? That you can do, like, the extra action after you play a card.
There's the start a project.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit. Projects can be literally anything. One of our projects was to explore the hospital. Another one of our projects to address our food scarcity was starting to plow fields. And through the turns, there are things that can happen that either give the project a setback or speed it up or just cause it to stop entirely because something goes horribly wrong. But every time you start a project, you get to decide about how many weeks you think it will take from 1 to 6, and then you put a 6-sided die to track that as your turns go through. So I think our crops, we decided that plowing the fields would take 4 weeks. And then that was just plowing the fields. That was before planting anything. So we had to start another project to do that.
Absolutely. Kind of get into the details of those even just being completely different projects. And during your turn as well so you play a card and then you adjust the projects on the board or on the map, however you're playing it. And adjusting the projects is just bringing the dice down by 1 each. And then once the dice hit 0, that project is finished. So every time it's someone else's turn, unless there's a card that complicates it, the dice always go down, which is a very efficient way to do that. There's something else that you said that I was going to mention. Yeah, the projects are very interesting. Essentially, just get things done.
Yeah.
And it's just based off of whatever you decide needs to get done and the things that you set up. This game is very much based off of making decisions off of other people's decisions, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how things play off of each other. There is a mechanic in the game called contempt tokens. I don't think we used that because we were playing over Zoom and it was a little bit harder to keep track of that. And we figured it wasn't necessarily as needed in our situation because of how often we were having our discussions. But basically you can take a contempt token and set it in front of you to kind of remind players that there are tensions in rebuilding this society and people don't always agree. But since we were playing online over Zoom, we didn't really do that mechanic. It's kind of up to you whether you want to do that or not.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like that can even still... the contempt tokens can even still work online. You just have to probably use something like a virtual tabletop or something along those lines to keep track of it. But I actually found the contempt tokens to be very interesting in the fact of being able to show tension and disagreement without it actually playing out. Because I think that can be a tough part in some RPGs where you have to play out tense situations. And this, I think, just handles it in a very interesting way. And you always keep the tokens on you unless you feel like a person kind of won back like won back the part that was contempt. So if they end up agreeing to an idea that you do and starting it, you can put the contempt token back. But other than that, they stay with you to show the tension, which I think is very, very cool, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. And it may feel like longer technically, you know, it's the quiet year. All of this is supposed to happen over 1 year. Especially with ours, it felt more like a few years. So you can certainly play it that way if you want. But we were doing some very big things. At one point, we found a library in an attempt to fix our knowledge problem. Promptly, the elders burnt it down.
No knowledge for you.
Yeah. So we had a whole little narrative about this library and the members of the society fighting back and forth on whether the scarcity of knowledge was something that they needed to address or not.
Yeah, that's again a very interesting way to use the resources in that way. Like, is this actually worth getting? Is this like, it's important? And that's the thing as well, is that all of the resources are important. Any resource that you pick is important to the place that you are building. It's then when you're in the game, how important do your people view it, and how important does it come? Like, is it something you guys are actually going to actively try and fix, or is it going to be something that people fight against? Which, again, very cool to just kind of bring in those social aspects without it necessarily being roleplay.
Yeah. And that's, I encourage people to pick abstract social forces as their resources, because we leaned very heavily on knowledge. We had our other resources, of course, to deal with, but I think having knowledge being one was really a driving force for how we portrayed the community and how they did things, which wasn't always very smart. So yeah, most of our stuff were physical resources, but I encourage people when they play to maybe pick 2 or 3 different abstract things as resources.
Yeah, be creative with it, because again, this game doesn't have a lot of limits on what you can and cannot do. With how the game is structured, it is a very collaborative game. However, there's usually someone who should be a feliciter. Kind of, make sure they know the rules, set up the game, all of that. It's almost like the role of a GM, except you're just making sure everyone is on the same page with everything.
Yeah, in our case, in our case, the facilitator actually had the cards and stuff and was the one drawing the cards and guiding us all through our turns, especially in the beginning, as we tried to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, essentially just introduce the people to the game in a way that's approachable.
Yeah.
But this game is pretty simple to pick up. It's pretty much just the turns, and then what you do on those turns is up to you. And what creative things that you come up with. Because again, it's very open, very freehand. You can pretty much do whatever. There is a lot of, obviously this is a game that relies on some drawing, as you are drawing on this map and making symbols and essentially kind of making sure you're noting down everything that's happening on your map. But you don't have to be the best artist. You don't.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It was quite funny when we were playing. Since we were playing online, I actually brought up my Wacom tablet and was just doodling stuff. But we have, because the cows, I'm actually pretty proud of how I portrayed the cows. We also have a cow skull on there.
For reference, Jay sent their map that they did during their Quiet Year game, and it is an absolute doozy, and there's just a whole area full of cows that says 51 cows.
Yeah, because of our we had a scarcity of cows, so we only had 1 cow, which was a problem because there was only one of them. But at one point we had a herd of cows just kind of come in, so we have cows now.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting thing with the game as well. While you are answering the questions and making your decisions on your turn, you can introduce positive and helpful things in the game, but you can also introduce negative and potentially dangerous things into the game as well, or undiscovered things, or complications. It doesn't all have to be things keep like going right. You can put in your own complications and your own negatives yourself, along with cards that you draw also might have you do that as well.
Yeah. We have a little forest in the corner of ours, which, another drawing thing, the trees are represented by arrows because the person who made the forest did not want to draw all the trees. And
honestly, fair.
Yeah,
Trees
valid.
suck.
But our people went down there and started our project to chop it down so we could, build some buildings and get some wood. And they chopped down this great big tree, which ended up like cutting off a river because it fell on the river. And then there was flooding. No. This map is about
a lot of water.
Yeah, there's a third of it blue because we had an abundance of water and that just kept causing us problems. So, there's an underwater city over in one corner. And there's flooding and storms, and it got very chaotic at the end.
Yeah, again, that just shows like all the interesting things that you can do. And like, can I ask how who essentially made the decision, or who did the idea for having the tree go into the river?
I can't remember exactly, but it happened at some point while we were doing the project of chopping things down. We had a discussion about how some people didn't want the great big tree in the middle chopped down, but then they did it anyways, and it had consequences. And we had built a dam earlier on. You can kind of see there's like a little pentagram-esque marking over here in this sea of liquid, and it got flooded and overflowed because of the tree and issues there.
Maybe an abundance of water was a downfall.
Yeah,
like there's too much water.
There was indeed too much water.
And that's where it comes as well. Just interesting scenarios of even what you decide your abundance is and how that can even complicate your life. Because if you have an abundance of cows and literally 1 million cows, something's going to go wrong there.
Yeah, you might not be able to feed them, and then
exactly disease, things like that.
Yeah.
But another something with the game as well. So you are playing through spring, summer, August. You're doing all of that, going through each season, playing through the weeks. How you end the game is when you get to winter. All the cards are obviously shuffled up. You don't know where it is, but there is a card that is essentially represented by the King of Spades. And when you draw that card, the game is over. Because kind of how it's set up in the game itself, like the PDF in the book, is the civilization that you are rebuilding was attacked. And that's why you're now rebuilding it. Obviously, you can flavor it to whatever you want to do for your own world. But as you're rebuilding, as you have this quiet year to rebuild yourself, there is a looming threat that's coming in winter. And you're basically, once you get to winter, you're waiting out to see when it will come. And the game you don't even resolve the game. You end the game right when they come, and then at the end you can theorize, what is it? What is this threat? What did they like? What are they? What are they? What do they do? How does our civilization fare? All of that. So the game doesn't even end in a for sure way. It's all about theorizing what happens to our civilization that we just built. Does it get destroyed? Does it survive? It's very interesting in the sense of like, you don't get the full closure there. And it kind of makes an impact of like, oh man, Are we gonna be okay? You know?
Yeah. At the end of our game, that's a part of the reason why things get a little bit chaotic because our people were freaking out about being attacked again. And then things kind of descended into chaos, and then the Frost Shepherds arrived, and it was over, and we're like, these people definitely didn't make it.
We died so fast.
Yep. Rest in
how
peace to our
unfortunate.
civilization. The cows rule now.
R.I.P. It is now Cowland. But yeah, that's how you can just start making little theories of, what could have happened. And another thing that I really love about the idea of the Quiet Year is the fact that you could absolutely use it as a tool to build up a community and civilization to then use in a campaign.
Yeah.
Or
it's
in
a
writing.
Great way.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's a great way to build a world with your players
mm-hmm.
and get them invested in the world before you even start a game.
Exactly. Then they get to have decisions and stakes in the world itself. And it might mean that maybe the Frost Shepherds, which is the end of the game, what comes at the end of the game, maybe that isn't total destruction, obviously, if you want to use that. Or you don't have to play it that far. Or I think there's a lot of ways where you can have some wiggle room if you are wanting to set up a world for a campaign or a story or whatever you want to use not a world, but a civilization for.
Yeah.
Which I think the Adventure Zone actually did that through making a civilization through the Quiet Year, then using that for a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you're exactly right with having the players get involved.
Yeah, and it's a great way, and you can always replace the Frost Shepherds with just about anything that comes into the town, and then that's where it ends, and your players don't know what happened after that, because maybe they left town and they come back to this place and see what happened.
Also, yeah, very true. Maybe they weren't even there. And that's those could be some very interesting scenarios, all depending on how you handle introducing them to this civilization.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention this, for some reason, I keep thinking about resources, and I keep thinking about having people as a scarcity, and how that could even be interesting itself, because maybe you're going to want to start looking for people, and that can obviously cause complications, because you don't know if ever, inviting new people and people that you don't know into your home and your place could be okay, but it could also cause complications. Maybe you don't know what could happen. So I keep thinking about that for some reason as we're talking. It's like, man, scarcity of people. That's an idea.
Yeah. Well, we can address the normal smiley face on the map.
For context, on Jay's map here, there's all kinds of water. This water there's a big basin and rivers coming off of these mountains, and right above this mountain, these mountains is normal with an exclamation mark, and then a smiley face right underneath it.
Yeah, so basically what that was is we just decided that there was a civilization of people on the other side of the mountains, which you can kind of see little stick people coming over the mountains. And we decided that they were normal because our people definitely weren't normal. So we just had a group of normal people on the other side of the mountains to maybe help. I think they came over, and there's little question marks, so I think they saw us and were like, "No, we're heading back." So
there's too many cows over here.
Yeah. And in winter, there's a card, the Jack, which is an infected outsider arrives seeking amnesty. They have some much needed resources with them. Choose one, welcome them into the community, remove a scarcity, but also introduce an infection into the community. So this happened on my turn, and I decided we're in winter. We need something good to happen. And I decided that the infected outsider was infected with knowledge. And the infection was knowledge.
The worst kind of sickness, knowledge.
Which the people in the town were not very happy about. But it did help with, like, educating our people a little bit since they promptly burned the library down.
That's amazing. Oh my god. And that's, again, different ways that you can interpret prompts. There's so many things, though. There's, like, especially, I believe this is right, but correct me if I'm wrong. You're supposed to, when you play this game, essentially go through the entire deck of cards, which is, like, 52. Yeah. Supposed to go through the entire deck of cards, and everything's shuffled and at random, and so each person takes their turn dealing one card. So that's pretty, like, it's about a 4-hour, I think, from the description of the game. It's about a 4-hour game to get through as you're going through this entire deck of cards, and there's going to be a lot of things that happen. It's going to start out very simple. You might just have a simple place like on the beach where it's rocky and you have a lighthouse. But then it's going to be that, but a lot more by the end of the game as it starts to build. Because especially I think in the first, in the first month, not month, but the first season of spring, it's just a lot of questions. So, like you mentioned earlier, the large body of water on the map, where is it? What does it look like? Or there's a giant man-made structure on the map. Where is it? Why is it abandoned? But there's also someone new arrives. Who? 2 of the community's younger members get into a fight. What provoked them? Where it's just a lot of questions of establishing the world and things around it, establishing the civilization and the things around it at first, before you start getting into deeper things where it starts to make changes, such as like projects failing, discovering things, even like just essentially building on it even more. And building onto your community more. And the questions and the prompts, I think, get harder as you go on. Yeah. Needing to make bigger decisions and bigger choices and stuff like that. But it starts out very fun and easy. Just a little bit of world building. What important and basic tool does the community lack?
Yeah.
Knowledge.
Yeah. I think when we actually got that card and the tool we decided was hose, because we were trying to plow our fields at this time and we didn't have hose, so that caused some problems because we couldn't really work our fields without hose. So I think that's one of the reasons we went down into the forest to chop them down to make tools.
Yeah. And again, it's all on building on answers. It's always, I think, even though you're going to be playing with the same questions and all of that every single time, I think there's a lot of ways that the game itself can go in so many directions. Just from the order you answer the questions, just from the different answers on the questions, I don't think it's ever going to be the same. Because just from order alone. If you get cards in a different order, you're going to be building things in a much, much different order. And especially with playing with different people, it's going to change all of that.
Yeah, you can play this game several times and get completely different results for each game, which I think is great. It's good to have a game with infinite playability, basically, especially when it's like as simple as the Quiet Year is.
Yeah, and anytime that you can get replayability is always a win. Especially from something that's not necessarily, I mean, it is an RPG, but it also, like, isn't. It's, like, again, kind of its own game. And so getting as much replayability out of it, fantastic. And again, groups can just change it alone. So even if you've played it many times, just playing with different groups is going to completely change it, because everyone thinks differently. Everyone's going to make different decisions. And I think from a previous episode, I was talking with someone and they were talking about how new players, people who haven't really played a lot of RPGs or things like that, can always make some of the most interesting choices.
Yeah.
Because they don't know. So they make choices based off of what they think can happen in what is like a limitless world. And this would be very fun to like play with someone who's very new to these kinds of games and be like, all right, let's build a civilization together.
Yeah, it'd be a great way to start, like you said, you could build it and then start another game with that as a setting. And I think it would be a great way to introduce new players to roleplay, especially in little bite-sized pieces, because the hold a discussion action, you are basically role-playing as members of the community, but it's in very bite-sized 1 to 2 sentence chunks.
And helps you get into it. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it so much. And you can get this game. You can get a PDF of it and also a physical copy at Buried Without Oh my god. Sorry, I almost said cemetery. Buried Without Ceremony.com, which is the people who published, I believe, the game. I think they're the publishers. But you can get the PDF and also the physical game itself, which has the actual cards that you can use, like the actual cards with the prompts and stuff on them, versus having to just use the book and flip through. But it's, again, very good game. And as well, I think The Quiet Year is a fantastic game to play in person.
Oh, yeah.
But it also works really well online as well. I think there's just a few things that you would have to change, like with the contempt, like tokens, like you might have to deal them out in a different way to actually show that people have them. But as long as you have like some sort of like virtual tabletop that'll let you draw, or some sort of like art program where multiple people can draw on the same canvas, you are perfectly set and ready to go and play The Quiet Year. Because that's just the main thing. Everyone needs to be able to draw on the same surface. The way that you do the cards, the way that you do the tokens, everything else can be loose and can be done in whatever way possible. But you all just need a place to draw on the same map, because that's where the real magic comes from, is everyone just contributing to the same thing.
Yeah, we had our map on Zoom whiteboard. So it's messy, but I think that adds to the charm of it. Also, apparently the whiteboard is endless, so a couple times people got lost in the void of the whiteboard and had to find their way back to where we were actually drawing.
Oh no, I'm stuck in the void!
Yeah.
That's amazing. And The Quiet Year is also available on Roll20. This is not going to come out while it's still it's available on Roll20, and it has like all the decks and everything on it, so it makes it super easy, and Roll20 can do whiteboards really easy as well. In February, it's actually a game that if you have a subscription, you can claim, though I don't think this will be coming out anywhere near February, but might as well say it. It's on Roll20.
Sorry, you're late.
Yeah. If you like,
should have been following the RPG Goblin Instagram where this was posted on the story. Follow the Instagram for more news.
Exactly. It was so funny though, because we arranged this like recording, and I bought the Quiet Year like PDF on the website, and then like a few days after I noticed that it was on Roll20. I'm like, god damn it. So I ended up claiming it on Roll20 as well. But we love supporting the artists, so I don't mind having to having to have bought it and then also getting it on Roll20. So but yeah,
having it on Roll20
cool
is like really convenient. I bet that would be a lot of fun to play. We played a couple different games in between some D&D sessions, because we had some players who couldn't be there for a few weeks, and we played Wonderhome, and we played The Quiet Year. And The Quiet Year is just like a great game to play when you just want to chill and hang out with friends.
Exactly. It's so fun. It looks very fun, and again, you could like probably you can shorten the deck, play like 2 hours. You could play the whole thing in like 4. It's just a fun collaborative time, and you can joke around, goof off, have a great time, and just build this society and
Yeah.
be really cool. I mean, if you want to be cool, play the Quiet Year because that's how you do it. But it is actually really cool on Roll20 because you have all the cards and stuff, and everyone can like get their cards in there or they're in order and everything. It's very, very, very fun. Very
That's
nice.
awesome.
But yeah, The Quiet Year is really cool game. If you would like to also share more situations and stuff that happened in your game, please do so because I'm so curious.
Yeah, it was very chaotic. So this game in particular happened probably like 10 months ago or something like that. I'm bad at counting, but unfortunately it happened around the time where I got COVID. So my memory is a little bit spotty. But I'm glad that I found the map because I can remember some of what happened based on the map and connecting it to the cards. The Nine of Hearts has the prompts, because there's 2 of them. A charismatic young girl convinces many to help her with an elaborate scheme. What is it? Who joins her endeavors? Start a project to reflect. Or, a charismatic young girl tries to tempt many into sinful or dangerous activity. Why does she do this? How does the community respond? And if you refer to the map, over in the buildings over here under the storm cloud, there is a little green figure with devil horns on top of the buildings.
Is that her?
Yeah. I believe her name was Alexandria. And she was mad because they burnt down the library.
Honestly, fair enough. I might, if you would be okay with it, everyone who is listening here is gonna know this probably already, if you say yes. But would you mind if I share the map on my Instagram when this episode gets published?
Yeah,
for people to have a visual reference.
I'll ask the people I played with just to make sure, and I will get back to you on that.
Sounds great.
Because I don't want to share it without their permission because
absolutely
they did create a lot of it. But I will get back to you on that. I'm sure they'd probably be fine with it. But
all right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah, because I think that would be that is the one thing. The Quiet Year definitely. Not the best for just pure audio medium, as there is a lot of visual to it. So I think if everyone's cool with it, being able to put it up and have people reference it while listening to, or after listening to the episode would be amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I can also just give like a brief audio description of kind of what the maps look like. So our map is mostly in like a square-ish formation. So I'm going to refer to the quadrants. The first quadrant being in the top left, the second quadrant being in the top right, third quadrant being in the bottom left, and the fourth quadrant being in the bottom right. So in the top right, the second quadrant, you see a storm cloud, a water spout tornado of water, that is coming down on a city that's made up of 2 buildings that is flooded. There is a sidewalk around this city, and on top of one of the buildings is this little girl represented as a green triangle and a green circle as her head with 2 little red devil horns. At the very, very bottom of this quadrant, kind of intersecting with the fourth quadrant, is a yellow building that we use to represent as the library. It is yellow because it caught on fire at one point. And back up to the first quadrant, we have, as referenced earlier, there's some purple mountains, and above it is written the words normal with a smiley face. There's people coming over the mountains that are the normal people from the civilization across the mountains. There's a couple houses on the mountains, and there's water that's trickling down into a big lake. which also feeds into a little area with crops that we built. There's also a handful of cows, and written is 51 cows because that's how many cows we had, along with a cow skull that was discovered at one point. In the third quadrant, on the bottom left, is a forest, an abandoned hospital, and a river. The fallen tree that we mentioned earlier that's going over the river. There's also like a little house with a ghost in it, which it was, we created that as a deterrent from chopping down the forest. There was a haunted house down there where the people were staying. And in the fourth quadrant, we have the haunted combine, a great big water reservoir. There's a dam that's been flooded. At one point, the combine was in the dam. I think they moved it out because they thought they were being cursed because they threw the haunted combine into the water. So they drug it back out.
Does.
And then there's also a city under the water that some of the people fled to before the frost shepherds came. And then there's some more houses at the bottom where people had tried to run off. But that's just a brief overview of what the map looks like.
And if it sounds a little chaotic, yes, it is.
It's very chaotic.
That's just how your game is also going to happen, because that's just how this game is.
Yep.
And again, if you're working with like a bunch of people, it's always going to be chaotic because everyone's just going to do wild and different things, and it's amazing. But yeah, it's absolutely a fantastic game. I'm very excited to play it for myself, especially if I can get a good group together, because I feel like this would be a very fun, like, one-shot type game where you're playing it in between a game.
Yeah.
Or to, like, fill a week or anything. Fill, like, a week of where you're missing a session and you have, like, people... not everyone's showing up, and you can do that. Very good, like, filler game, but also a very good game on its own. Yeah, I'm very excited to play it. I'm especially excited since I have it on Roll20 and I can use all the cards and everything. It's like, oh, here's your cards.
Yeah. That would be
not a
fun to play with. Yeah.
So yeah, if you think this game sounds super fun, I 100% recommend you getting it at Buried Without Ceremony or on Roll20 if you prefer it on that platform. And all of that. If you'd like to, I think we're probably, I mean, unless you have more to add on to the game, I think we're probably near the end of the episode here.
Yeah, I think so. Especially with, just listing out all of the chaos that was happening on the map. And again, I'll get back to you on sharing that. It's probably fine, but I just want to ask them to be sure.
Absolutely. So again, this was The Quiet Year, it's a pretty simple game in itself. The mechanics might seem a little daunting at first, but as soon as you get into it and play a few rounds, you'll get it. Very fun if you want to, like, just have fun and be creative, see what you come up with together as a group, creating a story, and even being able to use, like, this civilization and what you make in a campaign. Absolutely perfect for that. Again, if you want to get The Quiet Year, it's on buriedwithoutceremony.com, or you can get it on Roll20 as well. I'm very excited to play this game, and I hope that you guys are excited to play this game too, and that you get it. And I think that will end the episode there. Thank you again, Jay, for coming on and talking about it with me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening.
Bye!
Bye! Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the RPG Goblin. This was such a blast to record, and I am still so excited to actually play The Quiet Year for myself. Now, thank you again to Jay for coming on and recording with me. It was such a blast, and if you would like to follow Jay's Dice account, their information and their account name will be in the description of this episode. Next episode is going to be coming out Friday, March 17th, and it's going to be about a solo RPG called Over the Mountain. I'm super excited to release this episode. It's a bit longer than normal, but I'm really, really excited because it was such a great conversation. And yeah, so see you next time.